Okay, welcome everyone to this lesson. It's for Chapter 8, Lesson A, which is your template form. Please ignore any background noise you might hear. We're recording this at home during the national lockdown, so there might be some noise. My dog might start barking at some point, but let's hopefully carry on. This isn't going to be as well edited or professional because we need to get this stuff out as soon as possible so that we can give it to you guys so that you can learn from home. Okay, so what are templates? So templates are pre-designed skeletal forms that you're going to use as a basis for all your other forms. So up until now, we've been doing separate forms and all our forms have looked different. But I mean, if you're working for a corporation and you want to actually design your forms so that they look all the same, it would be a good idea to use a template, because using a template, you can create another form from a template and simply actually have the same colors, the same branding, the same layouts, that kind of thing. Okay, so as usual, we're going to use Forms Builder. So don't forget to start your OC4J instance. It's initialized, so you can minimize. And we're going to start with Forms Builder, right? So again, by default, we have Forms Builder. It opens up with an empty module. We just have a window. The first thing we want to do is connect to our database. We're going to use the built-in student account, which is what you're going to also use at home. Remember, you cannot connect to the Oracle server from home. You can only do that from campus. It's just taking a little bit longer than usual. It's early in the morning, so it also needs to get warmed up a bit. Okay, so now that we're connected, we can start creating our template form. Now, a template form is a custom form. So we're not going to do any data blocks. In other words, we're not going to connect any data block to a table. We're going to use a control block if we want to create things like buttons. So now let's say this is now going to be my template form, and that is my template window. So there's my template form, my template window. And now what you want to do, you want to highlight your data blocks, click create, and you're going to use build a new data block manually. Okay, remember this, when you've built a data block that is not connected to a table in a database, this you actually call a control block. And I'm just going to rename it to my template block. Now remember, we are going to use this just to hold together buttons. None of the items that we're going to create in this block are actually connected to anything in the database. They're not connected to columns in a particular table. This block is just there to help us hold related items together. Okay, so now the other thing we need to do is we need to manually create the canvas. Remember, when you use the data block wizard and you go to the layout wizard, all of this is created for you. But in a custom form, like a template form that you're designing from scratch, you have to manually create these things. Okay, now that we have our block and our canvas, if we right click our canvas and bring up the layout editor, you will see that there's our layout editor, there's the canvas, and now we can do whatever we want to do for this form. Now I'm going to make this form a little bit bigger. So there I'm making the window, well, there the window and the canvas got bigger. Remember though, you can make the window separate there's the actual canvas itself, and there's the window. Okay, but usually you want to keep it the same size. Okay, so here, what you want to do is you need to decide typically how you would make your paper-based form, or not your paper-based form, how you would actually want to design your template form. Now, I have a rough idea of what I want to do. So I want the logo of the company here in the upper left corner. I want just a generic text that says what the name of this form. And here, under the logo, I would like to see record controls. Now, this is the first time we're doing record controls. And typically, your record controls are what you are duplicate the function of the toolbar you have on top. So typically, you're looking at things like next record, previous record, add record or create record, delete record, save, exit the form, that kind of thing, right? And for that, we're going to use built-in functions. Now, this section that remains, this is where you're going to actually put your data. So once you've completed your template form, you're actually going to use your template form to create a new form. And here is where you're going to actually create your data block. Okay, so let's try it. So now, the first thing I want to do is I want to get the Northwoods logo there. So I import image, and then I can browse to wherever I've stored my data files. Remember, on your virtual machine, it's under course technology on your C drive 21629-8, and then you can choose your data files. So you can get it from anywhere. The Northwoods logo is in all the chapters, and you can use any one if you want to try this at home. Okay, so there's my Northwoods logo. Then I'm going to add some boilerplate text. So I select the text tool, and there and I'm going to call this my template form. Right, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I might decide to bold it, and for the moment, that's what it's going to be called, my template form. Right, so here's my Northwoods logo, and here is my form text. Right, now I want to start creating the buttons here. Now, please remember, if you've been changing text sizes, do you see now my text size is 20 and it's bolded? Look at what happens when I select my button and I click to create a button. You see, by default, it uses that text size. So please remember to set your text size to whatever you want specifically for your buttons. So we're going to set this back to the default one, which is 8 and unbolded. And I'm going to select the text tool, the button tool, sorry, and I'm going to create a button. And do you see there it creates the button there, right? Let me just do that again. You're going to select the text tool, the button tool, and you're going to click on the button, on your canvas to create a default size button. Remember, you can also click and drag to create a bigger button. It depends on what you want to do. Okay, so let's create some buttons that we are going to use. So I have one, and you'll see it's creating under the template block. Do you see why we need a template block? So that we can hold these items. If you do not create a block first and you create a button on your canvas, it'll automatically create a default block with a block name, like block 12. So whichever one you want to do, you could either create the block first and then the item, to create the item and rename your block. It's up to you. Okay, so what kind of record controls do I want? So here I have this button. This can be for the previous record. This button, I'm going to create another one. This can be for the next record, and then to create a new record, to save the record, to delete the record, and to, let's say, exit the form. Okay, so we're going to have 6 buttons in total. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that the space is more or less the same between the buttons. And then I can select my buttons and use the left align button here to make sure the left edges of the button align. So there it's more or less neat here. And now I need to remember it issues a default name and it gives you the label, the default name that is given in your Object Navigator. Okay, so on my Object Navigator, I just want to rename these things because remember that at some point you might want to actually name your text, right? Name your text. You might want to actually refer to these buttons in code, and it's much easier to remember the button names if you give them a name rather than using these default values. So this one I'm going to say is my next button. This one is my previous BTN. This one can be my create, or let's say new button. So for the new record, here we have our save button, or let's say our delete button first. Here we have our save button, and this one can be our exit button. Okay, but you will see that even though you've changed the names in the Object Navigator, the labels have remained the same. So how do you change the label? Remember, you select the item you want, you right click on it, and you bring up the property palette. And under buttons, do you see under the functional properties, you have the label property, and this you can use to change. So next previous, this will be my next record rather. And I will do that now for all of my buttons. Previous record. New record. Delete record. Save record and exit form. Okay, so just some basic ones. And believe it or not, that's it. So now I have my record controls, I have some text, I have my Northwoods University logo, and this space, like I said in the beginning of this video, is reserved for when I use this to actually create forms where I want to insert data. Right, so what you can do, or now, to make it easier and save time, is you can already code these buttons, even though there's nothing that you can actually, there's no data that you can actually affect with these buttons. You can already code it. So remember, we're going to add triggers to each of our buttons, and the trigger you use most commonly for a button is the when button press trigger. So now you'll see I'm doing a when button press trigger on the next button. Okay, now the question is, how do I actually make a record navigate to the next record, or the data navigate to the next record? You're going to use the built-in functions. If you remember in lesson 5C, we started using the built-in functions. So or built-in functions or procedures. So if I go to my help file, the one you're actually looking for is called next record. Okay, so here you'll see it navigates to the first enabled and navigable item in the record with the next higher sequence number than the current record. It's a procedure, so it's not a function, it does not return a value, and you're going to say next record. That's all. There's no variables you need to pass in, there's no values, it's just simply next record. Right, so here all I'm going to type in is next record, semicolon. Remember, this is effectively an anonymous block. So remember, you can put your begin, you can put your end, but if you do not have a declare section, you don't need to put the begin and end. Forms, the compiler for forms assumes that you are going to have a begin and an end. You can click compile. There it successfully compiles. Now you can use the help file to go through each of these. I'm not going to go do that. Otherwise this video is going to become far too long and far too big, and we need to concern ourselves with bandwidth during this time. So for previous record, I am going to use the built-in procedure previous record. I can compile that. For a new record, I'm going to use the built-in procedure create underscore record, and I can compile it. For delete record, this might surprise you, but there's a built-in procedure delete underscore record. For the save button, would you like to guess what it is? Save underscore record. I compile. Ooh. How do we save in a database, guys? How do we save a record to a database? Remember, to save you commit. And then again, the built-in procedure for exiting a form is, shockingly, exit underscore form. And that's it. What I always recommend is, just to make this a little bit clearer for your user, is use the framing tool to click and drag a frame around this. And the label you can set to example something like record controls, just so that your user understands that these controls are designed to manipulate your records, right? So this is my controls frame. Okay, so there we have our basic template form. Now remember, I've done some very basic work. I mean, you could, for example, change the background color of your canvas. It depends what you want to do. It depends on the branding of your business that you're working for and all the clients. For example, I could make it like that. If I could change it, I could change the color of the text, etc. That if you do all of this in your template form, you'll be able to have this, just everything is already done. You will not need to worry about it fixing all your other forms if you design a template form first and then base all your other forms of this. So now, how do I do this? How do I actually use this to create a new form? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to save this form. And remember, this is a very straightforward form. There's nothing fancy about it. You'll see it saves with the FNB. It saves with the FNB extension. There's nothing fancy about it. If you save it, you'll be able to navigate to the folder you saved it to, and you will see there's my template form. If I compile this form, you will see that it actually creates the FMX version of this form. Okay, you can run this form if you want to see it, but remember that because there's, like I said, it seems like we're having a slow day today with the virtual machine. But as I was saying, remember, your record controls are designed to manipulate your records. In this case, on this template, we don't have any records to manipulate. So even if you press the buttons, nothing is going to happen. The only button that will actually be functional will be your exit button. So if you see, when you click your exit button and you exit your form, it will actually close the form and just show this gray background that you're seeing at the moment while the form is loading. Okay, so you'll see now, if I click next record, nothing is actually happening. Right. So if I click exit form, you'll see there it exits. Okay, so at the moment, that's all you could, there's nothing you can do with this form. Okay, now let's say that I actually have closed this form, right? And I want to actually create a new form based on that template form. I can use File, New, and do you see there's an option here, Form Using Template. There's no keyboard shortcut for it, so you have to use this method. Form Using Template, you navigate to wherever your template form was, you select the template form, the FNB, not the FMX, and you click Open. Look at what happens. Do you see Module 2? So it's a new form, but do you see that it currently has all the items? Do you see that? And if I bring up the layout editor, do you see there's my template form? But this isn't the raw template form we were using. This is actually my a new form that has all of these items and the colors already and the branding. Okay, so now let's say, okay, I have this. So I want to select the data block and I want to create a new data block. This time we're going to use the wizard because we want to base it on a table in the database. We click on table and by default, but you're familiar with this. So we're going to base it. And let's say we want to do it on the student table that we've been using in class, right? I select my items, and now you need to be very careful. Do you see it brings up the relationship part of the data block wizard? Why? Because it's seeing that there's another block, and it's asking, do you want to relate these two blocks? And in this case, the answer is no. You just untick auto join, and you do not tick create, or you do not click on create relationship. It isn't, you must not join these blocks, because eventually we're going to delete this block because we won't need it anymore. So I click next. I'm going to call this my student block, and I'm going to use the layout wizard. Now in the layout wizard, you will see it showing me there is a canvas already called the template canvas. Do you want to use that, or do you want to use the new canvas? We're going to use the template canvas. There's no point in us having created this template if we're not going to use the same canvas. I click next. I say which items I want to display. I just rename my prompts. Remember, you can also do this in on the form itself in the layout editor. You do not have to do it here, but let me do it quickly as it's a little bit faster. Okay, so I click next. I'm going to use a form layout. You can use a tabular layout. It depends on what kind of form you're designing and what's the point of the form. You click next. My frame title, I'm going to set to student information. Remember, everything else I'm going to leave as is because we're not doing a tabular layout. I click next. I click finish. And do you see there it's added the data block? Do you see the data block is there in my object navigator? So now all I have to do is I can just click and drag this here, and then I can resize things so that it fits nicely in the area I've designated. And there I can just bring back my canvas. Okay. Okay, and then just to make the text easier to read, I'm just going to select all my items. And I'm just going to set the background color of these text boxes to white, just to make it easier to read on this particular color. Okay, and now if I run this form, so how's the weather where you guys are doing? Where you guys are doing, listen to me. How's the weather where you're staying? At this rate, the form won't appear until the pandemic is over. Okay, there we go. So now if I populate this form, do you see it populates it with information? So you can see it's connected to the database. Let's try using these buttons. Let's see if they work. So if I click next record, nothing happens. If I click previous record, nothing happens. Nothing is actually happening again until I press exit form. So now, how do I actually get these records or these controls to function? If you come back to your object navigator, to your help navigator, and you bring up this record, you will see that it mentions specifically that it's in the block that it's in. In other words, these buttons can only affect records in the block that they're in. So do you see here, they're currently in the template block. If I want them to affect the records in the student block, I need to actually select them and move them, do you see there, into the student block. Now that they're in the student block, they should be working. Okay, so let's try again now. If I populate this with data, look at what happens now. I'm actually able to use these buttons to actually enter information. If I click on save record, do you see the transaction complete, one record applied and saved? If I delete this record that I just entered, do you see it deletes it there? If I save that, do you see there it confirms the delete? And if I exit, it still works. Okay, guys. So that is the point of using a template. Now let's just finish off this form. Look at this compilation error that I received. No items on block, template block. Why? Do you see I had the template block previously, but now it's empty because I've moved all of my buttons into the student block. So what do I do now? I simply delete that block. I don't need it anymore. It was just a placeholder block. Okay, so now let's just finish this form. This is going to be my student form. And here, instead of it being called a template form, I'm going to set it to student form. Right. And now here, instead of calling it a template canvas, this is now going to be called my student canvas. And here, I can change that now to student window so that I don't have the word template anywhere. Right. So then all you do is you can save it. Right. And that's the point of having a template, guys. I hope this video helped, and this is basically what you need to know out of chapter 8, lesson